Hello everyone, welcome. My name is Ajay Pesteridge. Welcome to another flight simulator video. More importantly, this is just for P3D version 5. I'm going to show you exactly how you can maintain high frame rates no matter where you're flying or what you're flying or what the weather is doing. You're always going to have high frame rates if you watch this video, and we're starting right now.
3 arrival west, that's Angel, second control chart. Yeah, look at that, 22, 358,
So, you get into your sim and you go, I'm going to do a flight today. And I did a flight last week or yesterday and it was perfect. I really like steady high frame rates, really nice. And you get in, and today for some reason, it's just running like a bag of bones, It's like stuttery, everything's going wrong. And you're like, well, what's changed? And it's like, well, to be fair, a flight simulator is a very sensitive piece of software and it needs to have constant maintenance put on it in order for it to be smooth and successful, because there are so many variables which can change the performance that you receive in your sim. It is totally dependent on the hardware you run inside your PC, the software, your operating system that you have on your PC, and also other apps and background processes that might be running as well. It's so dependent on all those variables as if you're going to, achieve a certain frame rate. And people talk about frame rates a lot, and it is kind of important because simulation is all about simulating, in this context, flight. What's it like to be a pilot in the Boeing 737, doing the procedures, and part of that is having a smooth experience. If you're watching a slideshow in your flight and it's really stuttery, it just draws you right out of your immersion, and no matter what kind of cockpit simulator setup you've got, you're just going to be sucked out of that immersion. So for me, one of the biggest secrets, one of the biggest key things to having a flight simulator is maintaining a steady frame rate. Now, I've done past videos where I show you how you can set up your PC and your graphics card and your simulator to achieve a certain frame rate. I'm going to put the link in the description box below. Go check them out. There's a few videos there that you can actually do things to your PC, to your operating system, and to your simulator to make it perform better. But today, I'm going to put the final cherry on the cake. Now, this is the final piece of the puzzle to achieving a high frame rate no matter what you're doing in your sim. And I know a lot of people thinking, well, hang on, if I'm flying in a PMDG aircraft, which they're quite heavy in terms of performance, and I'm flying in like Heathrow Airport, which is notorious for having bad performance, and it's raining and thundering, and it's like, I want really good looking settings as well. How can I achieve all of that? Well, I'm going to show you exactly how to do that right now. So jumping into your simulator, okay, on the main menu, or the scenario starter as it's called, if you go down to options here, and you're going to be presented with your display tab, okay? Now, it doesn't matter what add-ons you're running, and as you can see, I've got loads of add-ons running, or your scenery library, which you can see, not loads are ticked in there, but, enough. But under display, this has all of the information, I guess, or, everything you need to know is right here, to be fair. There's a few things we're going to talk about in the world and the lighting, but for the most part, it's in display. So first off, ensure your display is correct, that your correct monitor is being displayed with your graphics card, and that the resolution is the one that matches your monitor, to be honest. If you've chosen something else, just reset that to what matches your actual monitor. And I find it best with my PC, with my setup, to have VSync turned off and an unlimited frame rate. Now, I only recommend that if you got the 30 Hertz thing going on with your graphics card, i.e. your monitor supports 30 Hertz, which you'll only know if you go into your graphics card setting in the control panel, and it'll tell you if it supports it or not by having the option to tick it. You might have to reduce your resolution. You might have to go to 1080p interlaced to show the 30 hertz, but if it is there, it means your monitor supports it. And if you tick it and run it, it means that the simulator, your graphics card, is going to lock off at 30 FPS because it's going to do a half the display rate. Let me show you what I mean. So under resolution here, 1080i, 30 hertz, right? Go into your program settings, go into P3D specifically. You want to make sure that your vertical sync is adaptive, half the refresh rate. If you've got a 60 hertz monitor, then it's going to basically sync it to 30 hertz. And your maximum frame rate, I put 33 to give myself a little bit of overhead. But basically, this locks off my simulator now at 30 FPS, which is much more manageable for my PC to render my sim in all weather scenarios. So once you've done that, you can then come into the sim and turn off the VSync within the sim and turn the frame rate to unlimited. And what's basically going to happen is you're telling your sim to always strive for as many frames as you can. Now, it's going to start pumping its resources into achieving that frame rate whilst rendering the world. Now, once it achieves 30, the rest of the performance of your PC goes into making sure your textures are sharp and that there's no blurries and that they're loading appropriately. And I mean, if I was to limit this down to 30, I would actually achieve probably around 20 FPS. But putting it to unlimited, it basically, you're instructing your sim to use all the PC resources to achieving 30. Like, that's the most highest priority. And then everything else will fall into place. You can turn whatever you want really into your image and texture quality. But for the purposes of this, I've got a 1080p monitor, so I'm using the high or the 2048 textures. If you've got a 4K monitor, I highly recommend you using the ultra 4K textures. Now, if you are using 4K textures, you can turn off all of the rest of the settings in this. It doesn't apply to you. But if you aren't using 4K textures and the textures you're using are higher than what your monitor can output, then you need to add texture filtering and AA on top of that. And again, it's going to be dependent on what your hardware can do as to what setting you can do. Now, the profile settings. This is the secret sauce, okay? This is the part where you're going to create for yourself multiple, as you can see, I've got loads, profiles depending on what you're going to fly. Now, but what I've done is I have created a daytime and a nighttime profile. I've created a profile if I'm flying with Drzewiecki design airports or Fly Tampa airports, or if I'm flying at Lukla. If I'm flying with mega scenery, I can click this, and you know, the settings that are within this are steered directly towards that product. So mega scenery, you know, this basically will showcase that scenery at its very best. Okay, and all the settings, as you can see, have changed now to reflect what I've set with this profile. So I'm going to show you exactly how to build a profile right now. So for instance, if you're going to be doing high altitude flying, there's going to be a lot of these you're not even going to need, okay? Level of detail radius, okay, means basically from where your plane is, there is a radial going around that focuses the level of detail to the highest just right around your plane. In fact, it's right beneath it. And then the more you slide this slider out, the further out that radius goes. Now, if you're flying at 42,000 feet, you don't need to have a maxed out slider. You could actually get away with a medium or low setting on this. And basically what that means is that as you come down to land, you know, there's going to be a big circle of detail around your plane. Well, when you're at the airport, that falls within that circle on medium settings. So as you then take off and gain height and the ground is disappearing beneath you, you don't need to see the level of detail to a very high amount. So you could actually, if you don't have a very, you know, high performance PC, you could tune this right down. Or if you're flying at high altitudes anyway, you can dial it right down. Pardon me. Tessellation factor. Now, this basically is it basically defines how sharp the mesh is going to be. So mesh resolution defines how many points are within that mesh data. Like, so in this case, it's down to 1 meter. Okay, obviously, you know, if you slide it down, you're varying levels of detail. I think this is the default level within P3D version 5, and most sceneries will recommend 10 or 5. I think Orbex recommends 5, but some sceneries recommend 10. I basically put it to the highest because I want to see, and the tessellation to the highest, because I want to see the sharpness within the mountains. I really want to see the detail in the hills and the peaks and the troughs of the landscape. So for me personally, that's why I put mine on ultra. But these are really heavy on your GPU. So if you don't have a great GPU, you could actually dial these right down to like medium or even like 10 meters and still have acceptable results. Like, there's not much difference between this and this in terms of visual quality, but in terms of performance for your PC, you've got to have a beefy PC to run this on ultra and 1 meter. Same with texture resolution. 7 centimeters, there's very few airports that actually support 7 centimeters. Most of them are 15 or 30. Some landscapes are even 60 centimeters. So anywhere between 60 to 15 is mostly acceptable, and also less performance for your PC. Doesn't take up as much resources. Obviously, you always want to have high resolution terrain textures ticked. If you don't, it's going to look like ass, basically. Okay. Now, your water detail, if you're flying at nighttime, you don't need this at all. You can actually turn it right off. So if you're a nighttime flyer or you're creating a profile for the nighttime, in fact, let's go through as if we're creating a nighttime profile. So level of detail can actually go to low. Tessellation factor can actually go down to low. Mesh resolution can go down to half, because to be honest, at nighttime, you're not going to see any of these details. Texture resolution can go right down to like 1 meter, because again, at nighttime, you don't see any of these. You could even untick high resolution terrain textures. Water detail would go off because at nighttime the water is pretty much black. There is no detail to see, and the same for reflections. Now, if you really wanted to keep your reflections on your aircraft, you could tick sim objects, or user vehicle, sorry. But to be honest, again, nighttime reflections not really needed. If you're using black marble, I recommend having special effects turned up to high on both distance and detail. Scenery complexity. Now, this one is a very interesting slider. You have to have your vegetation and your scenery draw distance maxed out if you're using black marble products. If you're not using black marble products, to be honest, your vegetation density could probably go down to dense, same as your building density. The scenery complexity, you can put extremely dense or just dense, depending, but it's your draw distance which is the real performance killer. Again, this kind of ties in with your level of detail radius. How far out do you want the scenery to go? Do you want it to go miles out or just around your airplane? If it's just around your airplane, you can tie it with medium to the level of detail radius setting and have acceptable results. If you put it to very high, then it's going to go beyond the airports, and if you put it to max, it's going to go out to the horizon. You have to have a beefy computer to see all this. Now, again, if you're running black marble products, you want both of these on high. Your building density, yeah, you put that to very dense, but your scenery complexity, you could actually get away with having that on normal. Cloud distance, draw distance, and everything, you could turn them all off, because at nighttime you really don't really get to see the clouds. But I would recommend windshield effects and volumetric fog and turbulence and thermal effects still ticked on, because if it's raining at night, you're still going to see that on your windshield if your plane supports that. Turn off EA. It's in beta at the moment, and it's prone to crashing, but if you're using black marble, it doesn't support it anyway. Same with HDR lighting, turn it off if you're using black marble, and turn off your dynamic reflections. You can keep your dynamic lighting on with your landing lights illuminate the ground on, but display lens flare is a personal preference. I don't tick it because our eyeballs do not give us lens flare. Okay, you only get lens flare when you're looking through a camera, or when you're viewing, say, a video where it's been recorded from a camera. Then you'll see lens flare. You won't see lens flare in general everyday life because you don't have glass eyes, and that's the only reason why lens flare occurs. It's the light bouncing off the sensor within the lenses of the camera. So you could untick that if you want it to be realistic, but if you tick it, it does kind of add a little bit of something, and but it's a performance killer as well. So to be honest, that's it. If you were creating a nighttime profile, which is basically what my setting here is for, then those are the settings you'd have. Now this is also set for daytime, which is why everything is maxed out, because I run this at daytime as well. So, and to be honest, this is my kind of all-rounder one that I use. I use this no matter what. But if I find that my frames do not achieve 30 and I'm flying, say, a PMDG aircraft, I'll click PMDG, and as you can see, things change quite considerably. This will make sure I get 30 frames if I don't get it with the other one. Same with if I'm, say, at Lukla Airport, you know, things have to be dialed down there as well. It's Lukla. And if I'm using mega scenery texturing, then these are the settings I have for that. So creating a profile very specific to the type of flying you're going to do is basically the secret to obtaining high frame rates, because you could actually set the frame rate you want to have. So I always go for 30 because it's exactly half of what my monitor can do, and my PC can actually achieve 30 FPS in all weather. So for me, I always try and achieve 30 FPS because it gives me a smooth flight. It gives me consistent flying. It gives me that immersion that doesn't get broken suddenly because it turns into a slideshow. Now, if I'm using a set profile, for instance, if I'm using, say, this IFR profile, and suddenly, you know, because this is obviously set for instrument flying, not for low down visual flying, as I get closer to the ground, things probably will look a bit assy. Then I could either swap over my profile completely, or, you know, just have to put up with it, to be honest. You know, just have to put up with the fact that this is what it sort of looks like. Now, this is what it looks like when you first bought it. Okay, this is the default settings. So all of these settings here are default. And if you remember what it looked like when you first bought P3D version 5, it didn't look that good, although, you know, things did look okay, but it was like, One thing to note when you're changing these sliding settings, and the final thing I'll say, is that they're different from P3D version 4. So in version 4, what is high in 5 is normal. Okay, I'm going to say that again. Whatever sliding setting is at its highest in P3D version 4 is the normal setting for version 5. Basically, they've expanded the settings for version 5. So whatever, if you maxed out all your settings in version 4, then you could stick everything to normal in version 5 and it would look the same. But if you maxed out all your settings in version 5, you're really pushing your graphics card, and it's most likely going to crash, because these are like really high settings now you're applying, because even normal is actually high to what you're used to. Okay, so if you've got everything set to high like I have, man, you've got to have a good computer to support that. You know, if you haven't, you're going to have crashes all over the place, because basically what is very dense now, or what extremely dense now, is just off the scale in version 4. You know, it's far beyond the high setting. So if you're used to seeing high in version 4, then just tick it to normal in version 5 and it's the same thing. So I hope this video hasn't been too confusing. Like, basically, there are certain settings, and I'm going to put a link in the description box down below to a guide which basically tells you exactly what settings affect your GPU and what settings affect your CPU. Now, you can highly fine-tune using that guide, which is linked in the description box below, to create a profile for every eventuality flight that you do. So if you're flying high in the sky at night, or if you're flying low to the ground during the day, you will have a sim that looks good, achieves high frame rates no matter what aircraft you're flying, or what weather you're going into, or what airport you're taking off from. Okay? Honestly, the profiles is the best way to, it's the secret way to basically making your sim run the way you want it to, or consistently, all the times. Please, it's not one profile that matches everything, because different flights require different settings. And if you do tune your settings per flight, you will find that your immersion is never broken. You don't get slideshow stutters, and you have a smooth and happy flight. Guys, thank you so much for watching this. Take care. I'll see you in the virtual skies.